Can you just explain? I'm just trying to get the context here. What are our international obligations in regard to the sharing of hazardous weather information with other air traffic services organisations?
Senator, I might be able to answer that particular question. We have a monitoring where the Bureau of Meteorology monitors obviously a number of locations around Australia and within the jurisdiction of our particular airspace that we manage. When we get information that is provided that is of differing nature from what the forecast is, such as a hazardous weather event, such as the SPECI information that you mentioned previously, that information is then sent to the control positions, and then that information is then relayed to the particular aircraft based on the fact of certain parameters where the weather has changed. And we call that a hazard alerting service. And what we would do, for example, if I use an example of an aircraft flying between Melbourne and Sydney, and they have the thermal area forecast for Sydney, and the weather conditions have rapidly changed and it's different, we will hazard alert and we will notify all aircraft going to that destination of the change in weather circumstances.
So did that happen here in relation to Norfolk Island? Were they deteriorating weather?
Senator, we're unaware because that flight went through different jurisdictions. It was in New Zealand airspace.
So that's a fundamental flaw then, is it? That we have no... I mean, from the evidence we've received through you, Senator, is that there was an updated deterioration report on the weather into Norfolk Island, which wasn't conveyed to the pilot by New Zealand, and there's nothing we can do about it, just tough tits.
Well, Senator, this particular flight, we were aware of the leg from obviously Sydney to Norfolk Island, and therefore, and also on the return, the Norfolk Island to Sydney leg, which is where we would come, where the aircraft would transfer to Australian airspace and air traffic control to be managed. The flight between Samoa and Norfolk Island were in other jurisdictions, and so we are not aware of what was going on in that flight.
So for future planning, so we don't have a repeat, have you been in touch with New Zealand Bureau of Met to get an understanding of what went wrong?
No, Senator.
Shouldn't you have? Wouldn't it be in your best interest to know that if the weather was deteriorating on one incident, which ended up in the sea, and it was evident that New Zealand knew the weather was deteriorating, the pilot didn't have that update, wouldn't you be interested to know, shit, we better not let this happen again?
Yes, Senator, and that's what we rely on, things like the ATSB report, to give us that information on how the system was working. And because, you know, if for example, the aircraft didn't ditch, and even though there was weather there, we're not aware of that flight, we're not managing that flight, we're not dealing with that flight, and so therefore, correct, we would be interested in the lessons learnt from the incident, and then we would rely that from the ATSB report.
Chair, may I just follow on directly from that line of questioning? Mr Harfield, let's go to the ATSB report. At page 7 it states that Nandi ATC did not and was not required by any international agreement to proactively provide the 0803 amended Norfolk Island TAF to the flight crew. Now, doesn't that seem, and I'm happy to ask to you, Ms Stabe, as well, doesn't that seem to be an unsafe practice in that it is tantamount to withholding of critical safety information that might otherwise prevent a flight from continuing into a dangerous situation, which occurred here?
Yes, Senator. However, the rules for Fiji and air traffic control are constructed by Fiji and international agreement. We have those within Australian domestic and the airspace that we manage. We are required to pass that information on to the flight. These are the rules of Fiji air traffic control.
But we're talking about an aircraft headed into an Australian territory, though, aren't we?
Well, he's going to Norfolk Island, yes, but Norfolk Island is managed by New Zealand Air Traffic Control. It's not Australian airspace.
It's not Australian airspace, but does Air Services Australia, are you saying that because it's managed by New Zealand, there's nothing you can do about it?
I'm not saying there's nothing that we can do about it. We can talk to our New Zealand colleagues about...
Well, have you spoken to your New Zealand colleagues about the PelAir ditching?
No, we have not.
It's been three years. What day was it? The 18th or the 19th? When was the ditching?
But can we...
The 18th, so it's 3 years and 1 day.
Sorry to interrupt, but You did say, Mr Harfield, because I'm interested too, sorry Senator Xenophon, but you would do that if there was a recommendation from ATSB, did you say that?
I think we need to just put a couple of things into context. You have CASA, which is the air safety regulator, who provides the rules and procedures that are being done by. And we are the air traffic service provider, and we provide services based on the rules and regulations that are set by CASA. And so we're applying the rules as set. When there is a recommendation that comes out where you will have another air traffic service provider that may have a particular issue, we'll have discussions with that service provider about the issues that we see, because we're surrounded by 11 different flight information regions, so we're in constant contact with our neighbouring air navigation service providers. But at the end of the day, we can talk about those particular issues, but they also work under the jurisdiction of their safety regulator and apply the rules that their safety regulator does. So, in fact, this would be a matter for the Civil Aviation Authority of New Zealand.
Yep. Sorry, Senator Xenophon.
That string of those comments points to the fact that if there was a recommendation coming out of an accident report that it would be an enhancement to safety for a neighbouring service provider to proactively push an equivalent of a hazard alert, then you would act on behalf of the government to talk with your peer, but that would need to come from a recommendation that CASA picked up, which was then put as a requirement. Does that all lead to the fact that ATSB reports should in fact have recommendations? Because if there's no recommendation, where would you take your action from?
From our perspective, as an air navigation service provider, we just don't rely on an ATSB report. If we see any particular safety issue, we have regular meetings and discussions with our neighbouring air navigation service providers, talking about the number of safety issues that come to our attention. It may not necessarily be in an ATSB report. So we're constantly having those discussions with them to try and improve the integrity of the system per se.
So how long has it been since this accident?
2000.
It's 1,097 days.
How many meetings have you had with your New Zealand counterparts since this accident?
We probably would have had probably about twice a year. But this particular issue is something that we did not know the intent of what was being passed to that particular flight, because it's New Zealand Air Traffic Control with the PelAir aircraft, and the same with Fiji Air Traffic Control with the PelAir aircraft. Not until the ATSB report was released did we aware that there could have been a deficiency with the passage of weather, and it would be something that we would discuss in our normal regular, but New Zealand Air Traffic Control will be doing their own particular review.
Chair.
I want to just make sure that it's just understood of where our role is, reference the rules and procedures of a foreign jurisdiction.
Sure, I accept that. What we're looking for, though, is, the intent of this committee is to make sure that we have the most proactive approach to enhancing air safety. And what that means is that occasionally we expect people to lean across the boundaries of their organisation and say, we see something that needs to occur, and if it's not within your current powers or within the rules, the expectation of the reasonable person is that that will be flagged so that this place that makes rules can take appropriate action. And so I guess we would welcome discussion around what proactive steps Air Services has or can take, as opposed to saying, well, that's the regulator's problem. So forgive us if we appear a little tetchy on this, but we're hearing a lot of that's someone else's responsibility.
Yeah.
No, and let me add to that in the sense that that's not actually what I'm saying. All I'm saying is the head of power for certain rule changes sits with the relevant regulator. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. When it comes to discussing aviation safety, I will use an example to our northern neighbours, both in Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. We are in regular contact with them on, again, a 6-monthly basis where we're either travelling up there or they're travelling down here. We're going through all the incidents that we've recorded between the two particular areas and trying to work to make the system a better and more safer system, and that is regardless of the regulators. Or we are reaching across the boundary.
I'm going to go back to
the fact that we
Senator
haven't reached across the boundary per se to address this particular issue is a different matter.
I think rather than have to accuse you of don't ask, don't tell, we'll go back to Senator Xenophon. Like the US
Mr.
Army.
Harfield, further to Senator Fawcett's very pertinent line of questioning, you're all over the shop on this. One minute you tell us that you've got a role to reach across with other agencies, but nothing's happened here after 1,097 days since the PelAir incident. Firstly, you've agreed, while the chair was out the room, you've agreed that it is an unsafe practice in terms of NANDI ATC did not and was not required by an international agreement to proactively provide the 0803 amended Norfolk Island TAF to the flight crew. Have you done it? You agree that's unsafe, yet there has been what meetings, what discussions, what active steps, proactive steps, as Senator Fawcett's mentioned, have you taken to deal with what is an unsafe practice?
Senator, first of all, I did not say it was an unsafe practice. I've said that we have a different procedure here in Australia where we actually pass the hazard alerting.
Do you agree that it's withholding critical safety information?
I
think you did.
No. What I'm saying is
if you don't mind,
there is.
if you don't mind, I'm chairing it.
Well, give him a chance.
But the point that we want to make is, it seems to me that there is a fault line in the transfer of information from New Zealand in this case, which is the point Senator Xenophon is trying to make. We're not saying that you're the cause of the fault line, but don't you think it is a bit bizarre, the present arrangement?
First of all, it was...
We're not blaming you for the arrangement.
No, I understand, Senator. I just want to make sure that I'm clear in what I'm saying. The fact is, this was not New Zealand Air Traffic Control, it was Fiji Air Traffic Control that did not pass the amended weather information. That weather information, on the basis of what happened in the accident, was critical in the sense that it would, if that bit of information was being, then the outcome may have been different. I'm reluctant to say that the procedure is unsafe because I don't have the broader information on what's going on. Here was a piece of information that should have been passed to the aircraft and could have prevented a different outcome.
But Mr. Harfield, if we could step back a bit, you've conceded that was a piece of information that could have been critical information. What steps have been taken to liaise with, communicate with, have discussions with Fijian Air Traffic Control since the ditching of that flight 3 years and 1 day ago?
None so far from Air Services perspective.
Do you think that's a satisfactory response?
At this particular stage, I do, in the fact that we do not investigate this accident because, and we are not privy to the information associated with this accident until the ATSB report came out. So in other words, I know that there's been a lengthy time since the accident happened, but we weren't privy to the information contained in the report until the report was published.
Can I just